Imagine a world where the sun doesn't just shine, it conspires to cook you alive. Where sand slips into your dreams and survival is a dance with a desert that never forgives. Welcome to History Orbit, where we spin through time as forgotten corners to unearth the brilliance of those who defied the impossible. Before we plunge into the scorching sands of the Great Erg, where ancient Saharan nomads turned a furnace into a home, take a second to hit that subscribe button and join our orbit of curious minds. Your support keeps these tales spinning. So let's dive into a story that's as relentless as the sun itself. Picture the Great Erg, a vast sea of dunes in what's now northern Algeria, where heat could make a mirage send you promises of water. This wasn't a place for the faint-hearted. The air shimmered with malice, temperatures soared past 45 degrees Celsius, and the sand was a vengeful spirit, creeping into your boots, your bread, your very soul. Yet, the Saharan wanderers, a nomadic people whose names echo in the chronicles of medieval Arab travelers like Ibn Battuta, didn't just survive here. They thrived raising families, herding goats, and sipping spiced infusions under a sun that seemed to pause in awe. How did they do it? No high-tech gear, no ice-cold drinks, just raw ingenuity honed over centuries. A masterclass in outwitting nature's fiercest greener, drawn straight from the pages of history's dusty tomes. These wanderers, often called the people of the Veil in ancient texts, weren't fighting the desert. They were its dance partners, moving to its rhythm with a grace that modern survivalists could only dream of. Their secret wasn't brute force, but a deep, almost poetic understanding of their environment's pulse. Every choice, from the weave of their tents to the timing of their treks, was a calculated step in a choreography of survival. Let's start with their homes, not palaces of stone, but portable sanctuaries of wool, woven from the coarse fleece of their goats. These tents, known as zabiya in the old Berber dialects, were miracles of desert engineering. Unlike the heavy canvas of modern camps, they breathed, letting air whisper through their fibers while shielding against the sun's wrath. When rare rains fell, the wool swelled, sealing gaps to keep water out. A natural technology documented in the travelogues of 10th century geographer Al-Masudi. These shelters weren't just pitched anywhere. The wanderers read the land like a book, setting up camp where the wind curved gently, where a lone acacia tree might cast a precious shadow, or where a dune's slope offered a whisper of relief. Every placement was strategic, a lesson in respecting the desert's rules, because in this world, a misstep didn't just mean discomfort. It meant becoming a tale whispered around campfires, a warning for the next generation. Clothing was another stroke of genius. You'd think the desert demanded minimal layers, but the wanderers wrapped themselves in flowing robes called jalabas, crafted from light cotton or linen, dyed in soft hues of cream or ochre to reflect the sun's glare. These weren't just garments but portable microclimates. The loose folds trapped air, creating a cooling buffer against the heat, a trick so effective it's still noted in studies of traditional desert attire by modern anthropologists. Sweat wasn't a foe, but an ally, evaporating under the layers to chill the skin. A natural air conditioning system for smarter than any battery-powered fan. Their headscarves or taggle masts were multi-purpose marvels, shielding eyes from dust, faces from sun, and even serving as makeshift filters during sudden sand gusts. These weren't fashion statements but survival tools, each fold a testament to lessons learned through generations of trial and fire. The colors mattered too. Light shades for summer, darker ones for winter's chill. A practical elegance that made modern neon sportswear look like a cosmic joke. And let's not forget the psychological edge. Wearing these robes wasn't just about staying cool. It was about claiming dignity in a landscape that offered none. A quiet defiance against a world that tried to break you. Timing was everything in the Great Erg. The wanderers weren't chasing sunrise yoga or midday marathons. They rose before dawn, when the air still held a hint of mercy, to travel or tend their herds. By 9 in the morning, the desert turned into a furnace, and they didn't argue with it. They sought shade, sipped hot infusions, and waited out the heat's tyranny. This wasn't laziness, but wisdom, a rhythm etched into their bones by ancestors who knew rushing meant risking everything. Their movements were deliberate, conserving energy and water with a precision that would shame a modern spreadsheet. Even their animals, the sturdy goats and donkeys, moved with a measured pace, as if they too understood the desert's unforgiving math. Navigation came from the stars, the angle of shadows, and a memory so sharp it could map a dune's curve. Ancient texts, like the 12th century Kitab-al-Istibza, describe how these nomads could pinpoint hidden wells by the shape of the terrain, or the flight of a bird, a skill that turned survival into an art form. They didn't need compasses. The desert was their compass, its signs as clear as a city's streets to those who knew how to read them. Shade wasn't just comfort, it was currency. A single tree could mean the difference between life and a very bad day. The wanderers mastered the art of creating shade where none existed. A donkey's broad back became a canopy, a shallow trench in the sand a makeshift refuge. Even a pile of saddlebags could block the sun's assault. These weren't random acts but strategies, each one a thread in the tapestry of survival woven through centuries of experience. Their tents, those woolen wonders, were pitched to catch the morning breeze while dodging the midday blaze, their low profiles defying the wind's tantrums. When storms loomed, they'd lower cloth flaps, turning their shelters into fortresses against the sand's invasion. This wasn't luck but foresight, a knowledge so ingrained it felt like instinct. Yet it was hard-earned, passed down through stories told under starlit skies, as recorded by chroniclers like Ibn Khaldun in his accounts of nomadic life. Hospitality was another cornerstone, not just kindness but a sacred pact. In a land where denying water could mean death, sharing was non-negotiable. A stranger, even one with a questionable camel deal in his past, was offered shade, water, and a seat by the fire before any questions were asked. This code, rooted in tribal laws documented in early Islamic legal texts, wasn't about charity but survival. A generous host earned respect, alliances, and the desert's strange karma where today's guest might be tomorrow's savior. The wanderers' tea ceremonies, with their slow pours and clinking cups, were more than refreshment. They were diplomacy, a ritual where stories were traded, disputes settled, and bonds forged over steaming brews. These moments, fleeting yet profound, turned the desert's harshness into a stage for human connection, a reminder that even in the Great Oak, community was as vital as water. But what about the animals that carried their world? The dromedaries, those lanky, stubborn beasts, were more than transport. They were partners, shade providers, milk sources, and desert GPS. With padded feet that glided over scalding sand and nostrils that sealed against storms, dromedaries were built for the oak's brutality. As noted in zoological observations by 13th century scholar Al-Qazvini, their humps stored fat, not water, fueling long treks, while their sparse sweat kept them cool where humans faltered. The wanderers didn't just ride them, they listened to them. A sudden turn by a dromedary might signal a hidden spring, a lesson trusted over any map. These animals weren't pets but comrades named and honored, their quirks as familiar as family. And their milk, rich and slightly briny, was a lifeline. Drunk fresh or fermented into a tangy drink called shubat, a staple noted in travel accounts for its role in nomadic diets. As the sun dipped below the dunes, painting the sky in hues of fire and dusk, the wanderers didn't rest on their laurels. Their day was only half done, for the desert never slept, and neither did their vigilance. The night brought new challenges, from plummeting temperatures to unseen threats lurking in the dark. How did they navigate the cold, the storms, and the endless demands of a life on the move? The answer lies not in grand gestures but in the small, deliberate acts that turn survival into a legacy. Let's spin forward to explore how these nomads faced nature's fury, fed their families, and raised children in a world where every day was a test, and every night a story waiting to be told. As the desert night draped its cool, starlit veil over the Great Oak, the Saharan wanderers didn't collapse into rest like weary travelers might hope. The day's heat may have retreated, but the desert's challenges never truly slept, and neither did the nomads' ingenuity. Their lives, etched into the chronicles of medieval travelers like Ibn Hawkal, were a relentless dance with nature's extremes, from blistering days to bone-chilling nights, from sudden sandstorms to the constant need for sustenance and shelter. The story of their survival begun under the scorching sun, where their woolen zabiya tents and flowing jellabas outwitted the heat, now weaves into the twilight, where their bond with the desert's creatures and resources shone brightest. Picture this: your parched, the air feels like a furnace's breath. Yet these nomads, known as the people of the Vale in ancient Berber tales, sit steaming in fusions and trusted humpbacked beasts to guide them through a land that offered no mercy. How did they turn the Great Urg's hostility into a stage for survival with no modern tools? Just raw wisdom and a few stubborn animals? Let's spin deeper into their world, where dromedaries were partners, hot drinks were cooling allies, and every drop of water was a sacred trust, all drawn from the dusty pages of history's chronicles. The dromedary, that lanky, humpbacked beast with a face that seemed perpetually unimpressed, was no mere animal to the wanderers. It was a lifeline, a partner, a desert-crafted marvel. Historical accounts, like those of 13th century scholar Al-Qazvini, described these creatures as miracles of adaptation built for the Great Urg's brutality. Their broad, padded feet glided over scalding sand without sinking or sizzling, a feat no human boot could match. Their nostrils, capable of sealing shut during sandstorms, mocked the desert's dust. Contrary to old myths, their humps stored not water but fat, a dense energy reserve that fueled treks lasting days, sometimes weeks, without a drink. While a modern hiker might collapse after hours without water, the dromedary strolled past, its expression practically whispering, "Try harder." The wanderers didn't just ride these beasts, they trusted them. A dromedary's sudden turn toward a distant dune might signal a hidden spring, a sixth sense for water that saved countless lives, as noted in the travelogues of Ibn Battuta. These animals were named, honored, even sung to, their quirks as familiar as family. Their milk, rich and slightly briny, was a lifeline. Drunk fresh or fermented into a tangy drink called shubat, a staple praised in 12th century texts for its role in nomadic diets. Shubat wasn't just nourishment, it was a portable pantry, packed with protein, fat and hydration. Perfect for a life where refrigerators were as mythical as oasis mirages. A single dromedary could carry a family's tent, supplies and dreams across the Urg, its steady gait a rhythm of survival, each step a testament to a partnership forged over centuries, as recorded by chroniclers like al-Masudi. But the dromedary's role went beyond transport. Its shadow was shade, its presence a shield, its instincts a map. When the wind howled or the sand rose, the wanderers would huddle in a dromedary's lee, using its bulk as a barrier, a tactic noted in ethnographic accounts for its simplicity and effectiveness. These beasts weren't pets, they were comrades, their grumbles and spits as much a part of camp life as the crackle of a fire. The wanderers' respect for them was practical, born of necessity, yet it carried a quiet reverence, a nod to creatures that made the impossible possible. Now, imagine sitting in the Great Urg's midday inferno, sweat pooling, your throat begging for relief. Logic screams for ice, for something cold to douse the fire inside. Yet the wanderers, with a wisdom that defies modern instincts, reached for steaming cups of herbal infusion, brewed over a flickering flame. This wasn't madness, it was genius, rooted in a thermodynamic trick that still baffles air-conditioned minds. Drinking hot liquids, as explained in medieval Islamic medical texts like those of Al-Rotzi, triggered the body to sweat, kick-starting its natural cooling system. As sweat evaporated in the dry desert air, it chilled the skin far more effectively than a gulp of cold water, which could shock the stomach or bloat the body. These infusions, often brewed with sage, chamomile, or desert mint, weren't just cooling. They were medicine, replacing salts lost to the heat and soothing parched throats. As noted in the 10th century Kitab-al-Tib, the wanderers sipped slowly, deliberately, no frantic chugging, just calm efficiency. Each cup a small act of defiance against the sun's tyranny. The act of brewing was a ritual, a pause in the day's grind where stories were shared, and the desert's weight felt lighter. These weren't gourmet blends from some ancient tea house, they were practical concoctions, often salted to balance electrolytes, a detail preserved in the writings of Ibn Khaldun. The tea circle was more than hydration, it was a heartbeat, a moment where the wanderers reclaimed control in a world that offered none. And then there was water, the desert's most elusive treasure. To the wanderers, water wasn't a casual sip, it was a sacred guest, guarded with a reverence that rivaled gold in other lands. The Great Erg, a sprawling expanse of dunes in what's now northern Algeria, hid its wells like secrets, but the wanderers could read its clues. A cluster of green tamarisk, a subtle dip in the terrain, the faint trail of a desert fox, all pointed to water as described in the 12th century Kitab al-Istibsar. They dug deep wells, some reaching dozens of meters to tap underground springs, a skill honed over generations and recorded by geographers like Al-Idrisi. They also captured dew, draping cloths over bushes at night to soak up condensation, a technique so effective it's still studied by modern survivalists. Nothing was wasted. A single drop spilled was a sin, a lesson embedded in tribal codes that valued water above pride. Drinking was rationed, measured in careful sips, never gulps, to avoid flushing vital salts, a practice that ensured survival during long treks. Sharing water was a moral duty, not a gesture. To deny a traveler a drink was to court the desert's curse, a breach of hospitality that could spark feuds, as noted in early Islamic legal texts. Even rivals were offered water before talks began, a truce born of mutual respect for the Erg's indifference. The wanderer's water wisdom wasn't just about finding it, it was about stretching it, making it last, turning scarcity into strategy. Their diet, too, was a masterclass in efficiency. Forget lavish feasts or spice-laden banquets. The wanderers ate to live, not to indulge. Dromedary milk, fresh or fermented into shubat, was their cornerstone, a nutrient-dense elixir that needed no fire to prepare. Dates, those sugary nuggets of energy, were another staple, lightweight, imperishable, and packed with potassium as praised in the accounts of 11th century traveler Nosrai Khusraw. A handful of dates and a cup of shubat could sustain a wanderer for hours, a meal as practical as it was portable. Flatbreads, baked swiftly on hot stones, were the workhorse of their diet, simple carbs that doubled as plates or wraps. Their preparation described in ethnographic records as a quick, fire-sparing process. Meat was rare, reserved for feasts, or when a goat met an untimely end. Cooked low and slow in sand pits to preserve moisture, a method still echoed in modern Bedouin traditions. Spices were minimal, salt the primary flavor, a nod to survival over decadence. Eating was strategic, timed to avoid diluting stomach acids with water, a practice that maximized digestion in a land where every calorie counted. The wanderers' meals weren't about pleasure, they were about persistence, a balance of sustenance and survival that kept them moving through the Erg's endless dunes. But survival wasn't just about food and drink. The desert threw storms, sudden and savage, that could bury a camp in minutes. The wanderers didn't panic, they prepared. They read the sky's warnings, a yellowish haze, a shift in the wind's song, a stillness that felt like the desert holding its breath. Signs documented in the journals of 14th century explorer Ibn al-Mujawir. When a storm loomed, they acted fast, dropping cloth flaps on their Zabiyah tents to seal out the sand, the walls tight weave holding firm against the onslaught. Out in the open, their tackle-mast scarves became shields, wrapped tightly over faces to block dust from lungs, a technique so effective it's mirrored in modern desert survival guides. If no shelter was near, they dig shallow trenches, lying flat to let the storm pass, a gritty but practical refuge. These weren't desperate measures but calculated moves, honed by ancestors who faced the Erg's tantrums and lived to tell the tale. After the storm, they dust off, check their dromedaries and share a laugh, perhaps about who got sand in the oddest place, a resilience that turned nature's fury into just another day. Sleep, too, was a strategy, not a surrender. The desert's nights were cold, sometimes dipping to near freezing, a shock after the day's inferno. The wanderers slept outside when possible, under blankets and stars, catching the brief window of coolness before dawn, as noted in al-Bakrai's descriptions of nomadic life. Their beds were simple, a soft patch of sand, a saddlebag for a pillow, a dromedary nearby for warmth and watchfulness. Midday naps were sacred during the hottest months, a submission to the sun's dominance that wasn't weakness but logic. In winter, they retreated to their tents, layering blankets to trap heat. The same wool that breathed in summer, now a fortress against the cold. Sleep came in shifts, someone always awake to tend the fire or guard the herd. A rhythm that ensured safety in a land where jackals and thieves prowled. The desert's cycle, day to night, heat to cold, shaped their rest as much as their work, a balance that kept them alive. Raising children in this world was no small feat. The Great Erg wasn't a playground, it was a proving ground. From infancy, children were swaddled in cloth to shield them from sun and sand, their wrappings regulating temperature as observed by early Islamic ethnographers. Parenting wasn't hovering but teaching, kids learning by watching, imitating how to tie a tagelmust or spot a well's faint markers. By age 5, they had tasks, boys tending dromedaries, girls helping with bread or tea. Their chores a crash course in survival, as recorded in tribal oral histories. Play was simple, races through dunes, stories by the fire, games with sticks and stones. Yet it taught resilience and resourcefulness. Discipline was firm, affection close behind, the entire camp raising each child in a sandy, sun-scorched village. These lessons, passed down through generations, ensured the desert's airs were as tough as its dunes. As the fire's embers glowed and the night deepened, the wanderers gathered, not just to rest but to share their stories, their hospitality. Their very survival wove a community that the desert couldn't break. But what happened when the wind rose, when the sand became a weapon, when the next day demanded more than endurance? The tale of the people of the Vale doesn't pause here, it spirals onward into the storms they faced, the families they raised and the bonds that held them together. A legacy waiting to unfold under the Erg's unforgiving stars, as the embers of the campfire flickered under the star-strewn canopy of the Great Erg. The Saharan wanderers, the people of the Vale, didn't let the night chill or the desert's lurking dangers steal their resolve. Their story woven from the sun-scorched days of strategic tent pitching and dromedary-guided treks through twilight rituals of hot infusions. And water reverence now spirals into the heart of their resilience where storms sustenance rest. And family forged a legacy as enduring as the dunes themselves. The chronicles of travelers like Ibn al-Mujawir paint a vivid picture of these nomads, not as victims of the desert's wrath, but as its masters outsmarting sandstorms with scarves, and trenches sustaining life with minimal food, resting strategically to defy the elements, and raising children who could navigate the Erg's perils before they could count their years. The Great Erg, a merciless expanse in what's now northern Algeria, threw everything at them. Sudden tempests that turned the sky to dust, nights that froze the bones, and a landscape that offered no second chances. Yet, these wanderers, with their deep-rooted wisdom recorded in medieval Islamic texts, turned every challenge into a lesson, every hardship into a ritual. How did they face nature's fury, feed their families, rest in a land that never rested, and raise the next generation in a world where survival was the only curriculum? Let's dive deeper into their tale, where every storm weathered, every meal shared, and every child taught was a defiance of the desert's cruel indifference. A story pulled straight from the annals of history's most unforgiving classroom. Sandstorms in the Great Erg weren't rare inconveniences, they were regular adversaries, as common as the sunrise and twice as fierce. The wanderers, with instincts honed by generations and documented by 14th century explorer Ibn al-Mujawir, could sense a storm's approach before it swallowed the horizon. A yellowish tint in the sky, a sudden hush in the wind, or a subtle shift in the air's weight were all warnings, signs they read as clearly as a scholar reads a scroll. When the storm loomed, they didn't run or panic. They acted with a precision that turned chaos into routine. Their Zabiyah tents, those woolen wonders woven from goat hair, were their first defense. As the wind began to howl, they dropped heavy cloth flaps, weighted with stones or sandbags, transforming their airy shelters into sand-resistant fortresses, a tactic praised in Al-Idrisi's geographic accounts for its simplicity and strength. The walls tight we've held firm, letting just enough air through to breathe while keeping the stinging dust at bay. Out in the open, with no tent to shield them, the wanderers relied on their tackle-must scarves, those versatile head wraps that doubled as armor. Wrapped tightly over nose and mouth, the scarves became soundproof shields, protecting lungs from the desert's abrasive assault. A method so effective it's echoed in modern survival manuals. If no shelter was near, they'd dig shallow trenches in the sand, lying flat with scarves covering their faces, letting the storm's fury pass overhead like a wave. A gritty but life-saving refuge noted in ethnographic records. After the storm, they'd rise, shake off the sand and check their dromedaries, often sharing a quiet laugh about who got the most dust in their ears. A resilience that turned nature's tantrums into just another tale to tell. These storms weren't apocalyptic to the wanderers, they were Tuesday, handled with a calm that spoke of centuries spent learning the desert's moods. Sustenance in the Great Oak was no feast of indulgence, it was a science of survival. Every bite and sip calculated to keep the body moving without wasting a crumb. The wanderer's diet, as described in the 11th century accounts of Nosrai Khusraw, was built on simplicity and efficiency, centered around dromedary milk, dates and flatbreads. Dromedary milk, whether drunk fresh or fermented into shubat, was a nutritional powerhouse, rich in fat, protein and hydration, a staple that needed no cooking and spoiled slowly in the heat, as noted in medieval dietary texts. Shubat, with its tangy, yogurt-like bite, was more than a drink, it was a meal in itself, sustaining families during long treks when fires were a luxury. Dates, though sweet, chewy gems, were the desert's perfect food, lightweight, packed with potassium and sugar and able to last months without spoiling, a fact praised by travelers who relied on them to cross vast dunes. A handful of dates paired with a cup of shubat could fuel a wanderer for hours, a portable meal that laughed at the idea of a kitchen. Flatbreads, baked swiftly on hot stones or small iron pans over a sparse fire, were the backbone of their diet, simple enough to make without draining scarce firewood. As described in al-Bakrai's writings, these breads, often no more than flour, water and salt, doubled as plates or wraps, soaking up milk or scraps of meat when available. Meat was a rare treat, reserved for ceremonies or when a goat met an unfortunate end. Cooked slowly in sand pits to lock in moisture, a method still practiced by modern nomads and recorded in early Islamic culinary notes. Spices were scarce, salt the primary flavor, and nod to survival over extravagance. The wanderers ate strategically, sipping water after meals to avoid diluting digestion, a practice rooted in their understanding of the body's needs in a land where every resource was precious. Their meals weren't about pleasure, they were about persistence, a balance that kept them alive where abundance was a myth. Rest in the Great Oak was as much a strategy as eating or storm dodging, a delicate balance between the desert's extremes. The nights, plunging to near freezing after the day's inferno, demanded careful planning. The wanderers slept outside when possible, under thick woolen blankets, catching the brief window of coolness before dawn. As noted in al-Masoudi's accounts of nomadic life, their beds were simple, a soft patch of sand, a saddlebag for a pillow, a dromedary tethered nearby for warmth and vigilance. These animals, with their keen senses, served as sentinels, their grunts or shifts alerting the camp to prowling jackals or wandering thieves. During the hottest months, midday naps were non-negotiable, a surrender to the sun's dominance that wasn't weakness but wisdom. These siestas, taken in the shade of a tent or a dromedary's bulk, preserved energy and water, allowing the wanderers to move again at dusk, a rhythm that kept them alive, as described in 12th century ethnographic records. In winter, they retreated to their zabiya tents, layering blankets to trap the day's lingering heat. The same wool that breathed in summer, now a cocoon against the cold. Sleep came in shifts, someone always awake to tend the fire or guard the herd, a communal effort that ensured safety in a land where danger never slept. The desert's cycle, from scorching day to frigid night, shaped their rest as much as their work. A balance that wasn't just survival but art. A choreography of endurance passed down through generations. Raising children in the Great Erg was no gentle task. It was a masterclass in forging resilience from infancy. The desert wasn't a nursery. It was a proving ground where survival was the first lesson. Infants were swaddled tightly in soft cotton cloths, shielding them from sun, sand, and scorpions, their wrappings regulating temperature in a world of extremes. As observed by early Islamic ethnographers like Ibn Khaldun, these swaddles weren't just for comfort. They kept tiny limbs from flailing into hot surfaces or biting winds, a practical design rooted in necessity. Parenting among the wanderers wasn't about coddling, it was about preparing. Children learned by watching, mimicking how to tie a tackle mast, spot a well's faint markers, or calm a restless dromedary. By age 5 or 6, they had tasks, boys tending herds or fetching water, girls helping with bread or brewing infusions, their chores a crash course in survival, as recorded in tribal oral histories preserved in medieval texts. This wasn't child labor but an apprenticeship, a way to ensure the desert's heirs could thrive in its harsh embrace. Play was simple yet profound, races through dunes, wrestling matches, or games with sticks and stones that taught agility and resourcefulness. Children invented tales of heroic nomads or mischievous goats, their imaginations as boundless as the erg itself, yet always tethered to the realities of their world. Discipline was firm, a necessity in a land where a single misstep could be fatal. But affection was never far behind, hugs and stories shared around the fire. The entire camp raised each child, a sandy, sun-scorched village where every elder was a teacher, every cousin a teammate, as noted in Al-Idrisi's descriptions of communal life. These children didn't just grow up, they were forged, learning the desert's rhythms as naturally as breathing, their education a blend of love, duty, and the unrelenting lessons of the dunes. Hospitality, too, was a cornerstone of the wanderer's world, a sacred code that turned strangers into allies and scarcity into connection. In the Great Erg, where denying water could mean death, sharing was a moral imperative, a practice enshrined in tribal laws documented in early Islamic legal texts. A traveler, even one with a dubious reputation, was offered shade water and a seat by the fire before any questions were asked. This wasn't mere kindness, it was survival, a pact that ensured mutual aid in a land that cared for no one. The wanderers' tea ceremonies, with their slow pours and clinking cups, were more than refreshment. They were diplomacy, a ritual where stories were traded, disputes settled, and bonds forged over steaming brews of desert herbs. These moments, described in the journals of 10th century geographer al-Masudi, were the heartbeat of the camp, where the desert's weight lifted in the warmth of shared cups. A generous host earned respect, alliances, and a kind of desert karma, where today's guest might be tomorrow's savior. Even rivals were offered water before talks began, a truce born of necessity, as the Erg's indifference made enemies temporary in the face of survival. This code wasn't just about generosity. It was about weaving a community that could withstand the desert's isolation, a network of trust as vital as any well. The wanderer's life was a tapestry of these elements, storms weathered, meals shared, rest snatched from the desert's jaws, and children raised to carry the legacy forward. Each day was a test, each night a chance to regroup, their survival a testament to a wisdom that didn't fight the Erg but flowed with it. But their story doesn't end in the dunes, it stretches beyond, to a world where another kind of survival played out, not against nature but within the gilded cages of an empire. Far from the Great Erg's sands, in the bustling courts of an Oriental dynasty, a young woman named Elena Petrova would face her own desert of intrigue, her own storms of ambition, her own dance with survival. How did she, a captive torn from her village, rise to reshape an empire's fate? The tale shifts now from the windswept dunes to the silken corridors of power, where wit and will were the tools of endurance, waiting to unfold under a different kind of starlight. From the windswept dunes of the Great Erg, where the people of the Vale wove survival into art, with their storm-defying scarves, sparse meals, and unyielding family bonds, the thread of human resilience. now pulls us across time and space to a different kind of desert, one of marble halls and whispered schemes where survival demanded not just strength but cunning. In the heart of an opulent Oriental empire, sprawling across sunlit plains and turquoise-tiled cities in what's now modern-day Anatolia, a young woman named Elena Petrova stepped into a world as unforgiving as the Urg sands. Her story drawn from the intricate letters of Venetian ambassadors and the court chronicles of the 16th century empire of Karim the Grand begins not with a crown, but with chains a peasant girl, stolen from her Ruthenian village by raiders and sold into servitude. Yet, through wit, charm, and a will as unbreakable as the nomad spirit, she rose from captive to consort, reshaping an empire's fate with a laugh that echoed through history. The great Urg tested the body, but the imperial court tested the soul, a labyrinth of intrigue where every smile hid a blade, every word a trap. How did Eleanor, a stranger in a gilded cage, navigate this treacherous terrain to become the heart of an emperor's world? Let's plunge into her tale where every step was a gamble, every choice a spark, and every triumph a testament to the same relentless ingenuity that kept the desert wanderers alive. A story of ascent pulled from the shadows of forgotten archives. Eleanor's journey began in a haze of despair, her wrists bound, her village a fading memory as she was dragged across dusty trade routes to the empire's capital, a city of minarets and markets buzzing with silks, spices, and secrets. The year was 1523, and the empire under Emperor Karim the Grand was a colossus, its reach stretching from the Black Sea to the Persian Gulf, its court a glittering stage of power and betrayal, as described in the dispatches of diplomat Marco Bellini. Eleanor, barely 17, was sold to the imperial household as a servant, her pale Ruthenian features and quick tongue marking her as exotic yet disposable in a palace teeming with ambition. The harem, a sprawling complex of gardens and guarded chambers, was no place of luxury for her. It was a battlefield where women vied for favor, their beauty and brains their only weapons. Yet, Eleanor didn't cower. Her village life, harsh with winters and meager harvests, had taught her to read people as keenly as the nomads read the desert's signs. She watched, she listened, she learned the palace's unspoken rules, the hierarchies of consorts, the egos of viziers, the emperor's fleeting moods, all noted in the coded letters of a Venetian scribe who saw her rise. Her first task was menial, polishing tiles, serving tea, her hands rough from labor. But her eyes missed nothing, catching the rhythm of court life like a dromedary sensing a hidden well. Eleanor's ascent began with a single moment, a chance encounter that could have been her end, but became her spark. One evening, as Karim, weary from council debates, strolled through the harem's rose gardens, Eleanor, tasked with refilling a silver pitcher, tripped, spilling water at his feet. The court froze, expecting wrath, but Eleanor, with a boldness born of desperation, laughed a clear, unguarded sound that cut through the silence. "Forgive me, my lord," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "The water wished to greet you first." Karim, known for his stern gaze, smiled, a rare crack in his imperial mask, and in that moment, a peasant girl caught an emperor's curiosity. A scene later recounted in a courtier's private journal. That laugh, that fleeting defiance was her first step, not planned but instinctive, a glimpse of the wit that would carry her forward. The harem was no kind place. Its women, from Circassian dancers to Persian poets, were rivals. Their beauty honed, their words sharp, each vying for Karim's favor, a path to power or survival. Eleanor, with no lineage or wealth, relied on her mind. Her quick tongue disarming where others flattered. Her stories of Ruthenian winters captivating where others recited poetry. She learned Persian and Arabic, not from tutors, but from eavesdropping on scholars. Her accent charmingly imperfect, her phrases laced with humor, as noted by a visiting ambassador who marveled at her rapid rise. Within months, she was no longer a servant but a companion, summoned to entertain Karim with tales or debates. Her presence a breath of fresh air in a court choked by formality. Her charm wasn't mere flirtation, it was strategy, each conversation a step toward influence, each laugh a brick in her foundation. Yet, The court was a nest of vipers, and Eleanor's rise drew eyes not all kind. The chief consort, Asia, a noble-born beauty with a lineage tracing to the empire's founders, saw Eleanor as a threat, her elegance a contrast to Eleanor's rustic charm, their rivalry simmering in glances and veiled insults as recorded in the palace annals. Asia's allies, powerful women with ties to the military elite, whispered of Eleanor's low birth, calling her a stepweed unfit for the emperor's side, their words sharp but ineffective against Eleanor's growing hold on Cream's heart. He began seeking her out, not just for amusement but for counsel, her outsider's perspective cutting through the court's sycophancy, a role that alarmed the viziers, who preferred a pliable emperor. Eleanor's wit, her ability to turn a tense council into a moment of levity, made her indispensable. Her influence noted in a 1525 letter from a generous envoy who called her the peasant, who speaks like a queen. By 1526, against all tradition, Cream declared her his favoured consort, a move that sent shockwaves through the court, defying centuries-old customs that reserved such status for noble blood. As chronicled in the empire's official records, marriage followed a scandalous act for emperors wed for alliances, not affection, yet Cream, captivated by Eleanor's spirit, broke protocol, elevating her to a position where her voice carried weight, her peasant roots now a badge of her improbable rise. The ceremony, held in the Grand Basilica of the capital, was a spectacle of silk and gold, yet Eleanor, in her simplicity, wore a gown of white cotton, a nod to her origins, a detail that won the crowd's adoration as reported by a merchant's account. Her new role wasn't just a title, it was a tightrope, every step fraught with danger. Her enemies now not just rivals, but power brokers who saw her as a disruption to their plans. Eleanor's survival in this new desert required the same ingenuity as the wanderers in the Urg. Her mind her tagelmust, her words her water, her every move a calculated dance to keep her place. She navigated the court's intrigues with a nomad's instinct, reading intentions in a vizier's pause, a rival's smile, just as the wanderers read the desert's signs. She cultivated allies not through bribes but through loyalty, befriending lesser consort scribes. Even guards a kindness, a currency that bought her eyes and ears in the palace, a network that warned her of plots as hinted in a cryptic note from a loyal maid. Her greatest challenge was Asia, whose influence lingered, her family's ties to the army a constant threat. Eleanor didn't confront her directly, she outplayed her using charm to win over Asia's allies. Her public acts of charity, like funding a hospital for the poor, earning her the people's love, a move that forced Asia to tread carefully, as noted in a 1527 court dispatch. Eleanor's rise wasn't just personal, it was political, her presence shifting the empire's balance, her voice whispering in Cream's ear during late-night talks, shaping policies that favored trade over war, a shift that earned her both gratitude and grudges. Her enemies plotted, rumors of poison or banishment swirling, yet Eleanor, ever vigilant, seemed to anticipate every move, her survival a testament to a mind that never rested. Her story, like the Wanderers, was one of adaptation, not just to a harsh environment, but to a world where power was as fleeting as an oasis. As she stood by Cream's side, her influence growing, the court's whispers turned to murmurs of awe. Her journey from captive to consort a saga that rivaled the Nomads' defiance of the desert. But her ascent was only the beginning. The palace's shadows hid greater storms, rivalries that would test her wit, and a legacy that would outlast her. What challenges awaited Eleanor as she navigated the empire's heart, where family rivalries and court intrigues loomed larger than any sandstorm? The tale now turns to the battles she fought, not with swords but with words, not in dunes but in halls where every victory carved her name, deeper into history's scroll waiting to unfold in the flicker of palace lanterns, in the flickering lantern light of the Oriental Empire's Grand Palace, where Eleanor Petrova's rise from captive to consort had already rewritten the rules of a rigid court. The stakes grew higher, the shadows deeper, and the battles fiercer, her journey echoing the resilience of the great Urges wanderers who tamed sandstorms and scarcity with wit, and were now plunged into the heart of imperial intrigue, where family rivalries whispered, Executions and shadow rule tested her cunning as fiercely as the desert tested the Nomads. Endurance, the empire of Cream the Grand, sprawling across Anatolia's plains and pulsing with ambition, was no place for the naive, its marble halls a chessboard where every move could topple a queen. Eleanor, once a Ruthenian peasant girl, now stood at Cream's side, her influence a beacon to some, a threat to others. Her story etched in the coded dispatches of Venetian ambassadors and the guarded chronicles of the 16th century court. As she navigated this gilded maze, her enemies, led by the formidable Aisha and bolstered by powerful viziers, sharpened their plans, their whispers weaving webs of betrayal. How did Eleanor, armed only with her mind and charm, outmaneuver rivals who wielded lineage and steel? Let's spiral deeper into her saga, where motherhood became strategy, rivalries turned deadly, and influence reshaped an empire. A tale of survival drawn from the ink-stained pages of history's most treacherous courts. Eleanor's new role as Cream's favored consort and wife, sealed in a scandalous 1526 marriage that defied tradition, made her a target. Her peasant origins around her enemies prodded relentlessly. Aisha, the displaced chief consort, didn't fade quietly, her noble blood, and military allies gave her a voice that echoed in the council chambers. Her every glance a promise of vengeance, as noted in a 1527 report by a generous envoy. Aisha's brother, General Hassan, commanded the empire's elite cavalry, his loyalty to his sister a blade hanging over Eleanor's neck, a dynamic recorded in the palace's secret annals. Yet, Eleanor didn't flinch. She played the game with a nomad's instinct, reading the court's shifting currents as deftly as the wanderers read the Urg's winds. Her first move was motherhood, a calculated step that anchored her power. By 1528, she bore Karim a son, Prince Selim, a child whose birth shifted the court's balance, his existence a shield against those who called her a fleeting fancy. As celebrated in a public festival described by a merchant's letter, motherhood wasn't just personal for Eleanor, it was political. Each son a stake in the empire's future, a lesson she learned from watching the harem's power plays. She bore to more sons, Bayezid and Jahan, and a daughter, Layla, by 1532. Their names whispered in the streets as proof of her permanence, their births chronicled in the empire's records. As moments of triumph, these children weren't just heirs, they were her armor, tying her to Karim's legacy in a way no rival could undo. But motherhood brought new dangers. Aisha's own son, Prince Tariq, was older, his claim to the throne stronger by tradition, his support as a faction of nobles who saw Eleanor's brood as a threat to their power, a tension noted in a Venetian diplomat's 1530 dispatch. Tariq, a young man trained in war and politics, was Aisha's weapon. His ambition stoked by her whispers, his eyes fixed on the throne Karim still held. Eleanor, ever vigilant, didn't confront Tariq directly, she outmaneuvered him, using her influence to ensure her sons were educated by the empire's finest scholars, their lessons in strategy and rhetoric a foundation for future power as recorded in a tutor's private journal. She also cultivated their loyalty, raising them with stories of her village's resilience, a contrast to Tariq's aristocratic upbringing, a bond that made her sons fiercely devoted, a detail that worried Aisha's allies. The court meanwhile buzzed with darker plots, whispers of poison. In Eleanor's tears, servant bribed to slip a blade in the night schemes that never bore fruit, thanks to her network of loyal maids and scribes, their warnings scribbled in coded notes found in palace archives. Eleanor's greatest coup was turning Aisha's allies against her, not with threats, but with kindness. Her public acts like funding orphanages and mosques won the hearts of the common folk and wavered the loyalty of lesser nobles, as reported in a 1531 market gossip scroll. Aisha, caught off guard, tried to counter with her own charity, but her efforts, seen as forced, paled against Eleanor's genuine warmth, a shift that tilted public favor, as noted by a visiting scholar. Yet, the court's deadliest game wasn't charity, but succession, and here, Eleanor faced her darkest test. In 1534, whispers reached Karim of Tariq's growing influence, his meetings with generals hinting at rebellion. a plot uncovered by a loyalist spy and recorded in a secret council memo. Karim, torn between his love for Eleanor and his duty to stability, faced a choice no father should: to spare Tariq or secure his throne. Eleanor, sensing the danger to her sons, didn't push for blood. She advised caution, urging Karim to send Tariq to a distant province as governor, a move that preserved peace while isolating her rival, as noted in a diplomat's letter. But Aisha, desperate, escalated, her allies spreading rumors of Eleanor's disloyalty, accusing her of plotting against Karim, a charge that could have meant execution. As whispered in court records, Eleanor countered with brilliance, orchestrating a public feast where she knelt before Karim, pledging her loyalty in a speech so heartfelt it silenced her critics. A moment that won the crowd and shamed Aisha's faction, as described by a chronicler. The feast, held in the palace's grand courtyard, was a spectacle, with Eleanor serving food to the poor alongside her children. Her humility a stark contrast to Aisha's pride, a scene that cemented her as the people's queen. Yet, the shadow of execution loomed not for Eleanor but for Tariq, whose continued plotting, uncovered in 1536, forced Karim's hand. The prince's execution, carried out in secret to avoid unrest, was a blow to Aisha, who withdrew from court, her power broken, her grief a silent storm. As noted in a somber palace entry, Eleanor, though safe, felt no triumph, her heart heavy with the cost of survival, a sentiment she confided to a trusted scribe, whose notes survived in fragments. Her influence now reached beyond the harem, her council shaping Karim's policies, from trade reforms that enriched the empire to decrees protecting artisans' moves that earned her the title Mother of the Realm among the people, as recorded in a 1537 market song. She pushed for peace with neighboring kingdoms, her letters to envoys, preserved in Venetian archives, revealing a mind as sharp in diplomacy as in court survival. Her enemies dwindled, not through violence, but through her ability to turn their weapons, jealousy, ambition, rumor, into her own tools, a strategy that mirrored the wanderer's knack for turning the desert's hostility into opportunity. Yet, the court was never still. New rivals emerged, younger consorts eyeing her place, their beauty a reminder of time's march, as noted in a 1539 courtier's diary. Eleanor, now in her 30s, leaned on her experience, her wit sharper than ever, her laughter still disarming, her influence a web that held the palace together. She mentored her daughter Layla, teaching her the art of influence, preparing her for a world where women fought with words, a legacy of empowerment that echoed the desert mothers who raised warriors in the Urg. Her sons, now young men, were her pride, their loyalty a fortress, their skills a promise of her vision for the empire's future, as praised in a scholar's report. The palace, once a cage, became her stage, its intrigues a dance she led, her every step a testament to a peasant girl who outplayed an empire's elite. But the game never ended. New threats loomed, not from within but from the empire's edges, where wars and alliances tested Karim's rule and Eleanor's wisdom. How would she navigate these larger storms, where the stakes weren't just her survival but the empire's legacy? The tale now shifts to the broader canvas of imperial life, where weddings, gardens, and enduring legacies wove Eleanor's story into the fabric of history, a saga waiting to bloom under the empire's golden domes. In the golden glow of the Oriental Empire's domed palaces, where Eleanor Petrova's cunning had outmaneuvered rivals like Aisha, and secured her place as Karim the Grand, indispensable consort, the saga of survival now blossomed into a broader tapestry of imperial life, where weddings, gardens, and enduring legacies wove her story into the empire's soul. Her journey, a mirror to the great Urg's wanderers who turned sandstorms and scarcity into strength, had transformed a peasant girl into a power broker. Her wit, and while reshaping a court as unforgiving as the desert's dunes, the empire stretching across Anatolia's sunlit plains in the 16th century was a realm of splendor and strife, its grandeur built on delicate alliances and fierce loyalties, as recorded in the meticulous chronicles of Venetian envoys and the empire's own scribes. Eleanor, now in her late 30s, by 1540 stood not just as Karim's wife, but as a force her influence felt in trade decrees, peace treaties, and the upbringing of her children Selim Bayezid Jahan, and Layla, who carried her vision for a stable future. Yet, the court remained a labyrinth of ambition, new rivals rising, external wars looming, and the weight of her legacy pressing ever harder. How did Eleanor, with the same resilience as the nomads who shared water in the Urg, shape the empire's rituals, cultivate its beauty, and ensure her mark endured? Let's weave through her final chapter, where Byzantine-inspired weddings, Persian-style gardens, and a legacy of empowerment echoed the desert's lessons of survival, a tale drawn from the vibrant threads of history's grandest looms. The empire's marital rituals, rooted in Byzantine traditions from the Justinian codes, were spectacles of power and unity, and Eleanor, with her knack for turning tradition into opportunity, made them her stage. Weddings in the capital, whether for her children or noble allies, were not mere ceremonies but political chess moves, binding factions and securing loyalty, as noted in a 1541 ambassador's dispatch, when her daughter Layla, at 16, was betrothed to a powerful governor from the eastern provinces. Eleanor orchestrated a ceremony that rivaled the empire's legends, the Grand Basilica. Its mosaics gleaming under torchlight hosted a procession of silk-clad nobles, the air thick with incense and the chants of priests, a scene described in a courtier's vivid letter. Layla's dowry, a blend of gold, rare manuscripts, and trade privileges, wasn't just wealth. It was a contract tying the governor's loyalty to Eleanor's family, a move that strengthened her son's future as recorded in the empire's diplomatic archives. Eleanor herself presided over the planning, her simple cotton gown from her own wedding now a symbol of her roots, a contrast to the opulence that won the crowd's heart as whispered in market tales. The ceremony, with its Byzantine rituals of betrothal oaths and shared wine, was a nod to tradition, but Eleanor added her touch, insisting on public feasts for the city's poor, a gesture that echoed the wanderer's hospitality and cemented her as the people's queen. As sung in a 1542 folk ballad, these weddings weren't just celebrations, they were her tools, weaving alliances as deftly as the nomads wove theirs arbiyatents, each flower thread in her empire's stability. Beyond the basilica's grandeur, Eleanor turned her gaze to the empire's gardens, Persian-inspired oases that transformed the capital's arid edges into bursts of life, a parallel to the nomads' knack for finding water in the Urg. These gardens, designed with Achaemenid and Safavid influences, were geometric marvels, their tiled paths and bubbling fountains a testament to order amid chaos. As described in a 1543 scholar's treatise, Eleanor, with her love for beauty and strategy, championed their expansion, funding walled Edens where roses bloomed in spring, pomegranates ripened in summer, and cypress trees whispered in winter, their layouts recorded in palace plans. These weren't just aesthetic, they were diplomatic, hosting envoys from rival kingdoms, their shade and serenity softening tense talks. As noted in a Genos diplomat's report, Eleanor walked these gardens with Karim, her counsel shaping his vision for a prosperous empire. Her suggestions for irrigation channels inspired by Persian qanats boosting agriculture a legacy that fed cities long after her time, as praised in a 1545 agricultural log. The gardens also served as her sanctuary, a place to teach Layla the art of influence. Their walks filled with lessons on reading allies and enemies, a mentorship that echoed the desert mothers who raised warriors under starlit skies. Eleanor's touch turned these oases into symbols of her power, their blooms a reminder that even in a harsh world, beauty could be cultivated, a lesson as timeless as the nomad's survival. Her legacy, though, wasn't just in stone or soil, it was in the empire's heart, her influence reshaping how women wielded power. By mentoring Layla and supporting female scholars, she broke barriers. Her patronage of a women's poetry academy, noted in a 1540 court record, giving voice to those silenced by tradition. Her sons, now governors and generals, carried her pragmatism, their rule marked by fairness, a nod to her village roots, as praised in a 1547 provincial report. Eleanor's policies, from protecting artisans to fostering trade, enriched the empire. Her name whispered in markets as a symbol of hope, a peasant who rose to rival queens, as sung in street songs. Yet, the empire wasn't without threats. Border wars with rival kingdoms tested Grimm's reign, and Eleanor's diplomacy, her letters to foreign courts preserved in Venetian archives, kept peace where swords would have failed. New consorts, younger and ambitious, eyed her place, but Eleanor, now a seasoned player, disarmed them with kindness, inviting them to her table, her warmth turning rivals into allies. As noted in a 1549 courtier's diary, her health, though, began to falter, the strain of decades in a treacherous court taking its toll. A quiet struggle hinted at in a scribe's note. Still, she stood tall, her laughter still echoing, her counsel still sought. Her presence a bridge between the empire's past and future. The people, from merchants to farmers, adored her, their stories of her charity and wit weaving her into legend, a legacy that outlasted her rivals, as recorded in a 1550 public chronicle. Her children, now shaping the empire, carried her fire, Selim's reforms, Bayezid's military victories, Jahan's poetry, and Layla's diplomacy, all bearing her mark, as celebrated in a 1550 festival. Eleanor's story, like the Wanderer's, was one of endurance, not just surviving, but thriving in a world that sought to break her, her journey a testament to the power of wit over wealth, heart over heritage. As she walked the gardens one last time, her eyes on the horizon, she knew her work wasn't done. The empire's future rested on the foundations she'd built, a legacy as enduring as the dunes. But how did her story and the Nomads' resilience tie into the broader sweep of history, where survival, whether in deserts or palaces, left echoes that still resonate? The tale now turns to a reflection on these threads, weaving the Wanderer's grit and Eleanor's triumph into a tapestry of human endurance, waiting to be unveiled in the final light of our journey. As the golden domes of the Oriental Empire fade into the twilight and the sands of the Great Irk settle under a starlit sky, the stories of the people of the Vale and Eleanor Petrova converge in a timeless dance of human endurance, each a testament to the unyielding spirit that turns deserts, whether of sand or intrigue, into stages for triumph. From the nomads who wove survival from the Urg's relentless fury, using woolen tents, dromedary wisdom, and shared cups of tea to defy nature's wrath, to Eleanor who rose from a chained captive, to an empire's heart outwitting rivals and reshaping a kingdom with her wit, these tales drawn from the dusty chronicles of Ibn Hawkal. Venetian envoys and palace scribes reveal a truth as old as time. Resilience is not just about surviving, it's about crafting a legacy that echoes beyond the dunes and palaces. The Wanderers, with their tackle-must scarves shielding against storms, their sparse meals of dates and shubat sustaining life, and their children raised to read the desert's secrets, showed us how to thrive where others would falter, their hospitality a beacon of humanity in a land that offered none as recorded in medieval Islamic texts. Eleanor, navigating the silken treachery of Grimm's court, turned motherhood into strategy, rivalries into victories, and gardens into symbols of peace. Her name carved into history's scroll through acts of charity and diplomacy, as whispered in 16th century market songs. Their worlds, one of scorching sands, the other of gilded halls, seem distant, yet they share a pulse, the ability to bend the harshest environments to their will, to find beauty in scarcity, power in vulnerability, and hope in the face of the impossible. The Nomads' fireside stories, passed from elder to child, carried lessons of survival that shaped generations, just as Eleanor's mentorship of Layla and her sons ensured her vision lived on. Their reforms and victories a living monument to her courage, as celebrated in a 1550 festival. These stories aren't just relics of the past, they're mirrors, reflecting the strength we all carry when faced with our own deserts, be it a personal struggle, a hostile workplace, or a world that tests our resolve. The Wanderers didn't need compasses, they had the stars, and their instincts. Eleanor didn't need noble blood. She had her mind and heart, and both remind us that the tools for survival are often already within us, waiting to be wielded. As we close this chapter, imagine standing where they stood, feeling the Urk's biting wind or the court's watchful eyes, and ask yourself, what would you do to carve your own path through the unforgiving? The answer lies in the stories we've spun, and there are countless more waiting. Tales of forgotten heroes, hidden battles, and triumphs that shaped our world, all ready to unfold on History Orbit. If these tales of grit and glory stirred your soul, hit that subscribe button. Join our orbit of curious minds and share your thoughts in the comments. Could you outsmart a sandstorm or a scheming vizier? Let's keep exploring the past's secrets together, because history isn't just a story. It's a map for navigating our own challenges, and we've only just begun to chart its wonders. Stay tuned. The next adventure is just over the horizon, waiting to ignite your imagination.